Listen carefully, chosen one. What you've called loneliness was never punishment, it was preparation. While the world convinced you that isolation meant rejection, a divine protocol was unfolding in the shadows of your life. Your solitude wasn't accidental, it was authorized, orchestrated. Every person who walked away, every door that closed, every silent night you endured, these were not signs of abandonment, but evidence of extraction. You were being separated for a reason the ordinary mind cannot comprehend. There is a hidden war being waged around you, and your isolation has been the training ground for a mission only you can complete. The enemy searched for you in crowds while you were being forged in the margins. Your aloneness was a divine firewall. And now the truth behind your separation is about to be revealed. Chosen one, like this video, subscribe, and comment. I am ready for a powerful surprise. The isolation protocol. Your removal from every group, every circle, every community that felt like it should be home. This was not social failure. This was divine extraction. The records are clear. Your presence among the unawakened created interference patterns that threatened the purity of your signal. You carried frequencies that destabilize systems operating on borrowed consciousness, systems built on collective illusion and inherited identities. Every time you tried to belong, internal alarms sounded within you. Nausea, exhaustion, a visceral sense of wrongness you couldn't explain. This wasn't social anxiety. This was your original design, rejecting contamination. Your nervous system recognized the danger before your mind could name it. Proximity to others who operated on autopilot, who lived through scripts written by culture and trauma, would have distorted your calibration. Their fears would have become your fears. Their limitations would have become your ceiling. Their unquestioned beliefs would have infected your clarity. So, you were pulled out. Forcibly. Repeatedly. No matter how hard you tried to force belonging, the universe intervened. Friendships dissolved without explanation. Groups expelled you for reasons that made no sense. You were left standing outside, watching through windows at lives you could never fully enter. And while this felt like exile, it was actually quarantine. You were being kept pure. Your inner frequencies needed to calibrate without the distortion of collective unconsciousness. Loneliness became the firewall that prevented hostile energies from mapping your blueprint, from understanding the architecture of what you were becoming. They couldn't track what they couldn't see, and you couldn't be corrupted by what you weren't connected to. The isolation wasn't cruelty, it was containment, sacred containment, the bloodline containment strategy. Even your own family could never fully reach you, and this distance wasn't dysfunction, it was design. The bloodline you were born into carries unresolved fractures, dormant curses, and repeating cycles of failure that span generations. These patterns operate like gravitational fields, pulling each new generation into the same orbit of limitation. Had you remained emotionally enmeshed with your relatives, you would have inherited their unfinished business. Their trauma would have become your trauma. Their ceiling would have become your sky. The emotional distance you experienced, the misunderstandings, the sense of being a stranger in your own home. These were not wounds to heal, but boundaries to maintain. Familiar spaces activated memory locks, ancient agreements made before you arrived, contracts signed in blood and belief that were meant to keep you small, compliant, available for sacrifice. But something in you refused the inheritance. You felt it every time you returned home. That suffocating weight, that pressure to shrink, to perform, to become the version of you they needed, rather than the version you were destined to be. Being misunderstood by your own blood, severed unconscious loyalty contracts. Their inability to see you clearly meant they couldn't bind you to their story. You were extracted from the family system not to punish you, but to end a pattern. The generational curse stops with you. The repeating failure ends with you. You were never meant to continue the legacy. You were sent to disrupt it, to break the cycle, to become the anomaly that rewrites the code. This is why you feel like a foreigner in your own lineage. Because you are. You don't belong to their past. You belong to a future they can't yet imagine. The shadow training grounds. Solitude was never empty space. It was the arena where your shadow could surface without the audience that would have judged, shamed, or forced it back underground. In silence, without witnesses, the parts of yourself you had exiled came forward. The rage, the hunger, the ruthless clarity you'd been taught to hide. Every night you spent alone was a confrontation with the internal enemy, the saboteur that wore your face, the voice that whispered your deepest doubts in your own tone. This was training others avoid their entire lives. They surround themselves with noise, distraction, constant company precisely to escape this encounter, but you had no escape. The silence was relentless. It cornered you. It forced you to face what you'd buried. And in that facing, something sharpened. Perception others will never develop because they never had to. You learned to read energy without words. You learned to feel intention beneath performance. You learned restraint, the kind that only comes from holding lethal force in check while alone with your darkest impulses. Suppressed instincts reactivated in the dark. Alertness that reads danger before it arrives. Discernment that sees through illusion in real time. Restraint that knows when to strike and when to vanish. Loneliness exposed your internal enemy long before the external one revealed itself. You met your shadow on your terms, in private, where the battle could be fought without collateral damage. This prepared you, because when the real enemy appears, you will already be intimate with every trick, every manipulation, every seduction they might use. You've already defeated those weapons inside yourself. The training grounds were brutal because the war ahead demanded it. You were trained where applause could not reach, so praise could never corrupt you. The enemy's blind spot. There are systems watching, always watching. Surveillance algorithms designed to predict behavior, map relationships, identify threats before they fully form. These systems track clusters, networks, social graphs, the predictable patterns of human connection. But they cannot track anomalies. They cannot map what moves alone. Your isolation removed you from their prediction models. Without allies to interrogate, enemies lost access points to your intentions. Your silence became unreadable terrain. No digital footprint to mine. No confidants to turn. No leaks, no tells, no weaknesses shared over wine or pillow talk. You moved through life like a ghost, present but unregistered, visible but untrackable. While they monitored crowds, analyzed group behavior, predicted movements based on social connection, you slipped through the margins, unseen, unregistered, operating outside the parameters they were designed to detect. This wasn't paranoia, this was protection. The mission you're being prepared for has enemies, real enemies. Not metaphorical darkness, but conscious opposition, systems and entities that would have stopped you before you started had they identified the threat you represent. But they couldn't find you, because you weren't where they were looking. You walked alone, and in that solitude, you became invisible to the machinery of control. No social network to infiltrate, no inner circle to compromise, no patterns to analyze. Your isolation was camouflage, strategic concealment, a divine blind spot engineered into your path to keep you off the radar until the moment of activation. They will see you when it's too late to stop you. The covenant of silence. There are truths embedded in your marrow that cannot survive exposure to premature ears. Your life has required sealed chambers, memories that only activate at precise thresholds, knowledge that would have destroyed you had it arrived too soon. You've felt this, haven't you? The sense that you're carrying something you can't name, something too large for words, too dangerous for casual conversation. You've tried to speak it, tried to share what you see, what you know, what you sense moving beneath the surface of reality, and every time you tried, the words turned to ash. Or worse, they were heard and mocked, dismissed, pathologized. This wasn't failure. This was the covenant of silence, protecting itself. Speaking too soon would have rerouted your destiny into spectacle or misunderstanding. Your truth would have been stolen, repackaged, sold back to you as someone else's revelation. Or it would have been weaponized against you, used to diagnose, medicate, institutionalize the vision that frightened those who couldn't see. Silence preserved potency. Secrecy preserved authority. You were hidden because revelation without timing becomes destruction. The prophet who speaks before the appointed hour becomes the madman. The warrior who reveals strategy before battle loses the advantage. You were forbidden from being fully known, because full knowledge of what you carry would have triggered defenses you weren't yet equipped to overcome. The silence wasn't shame. It was stealth, sacred stealth. And those who needed to understand couldn't yet. Those who could understand weren't yet present. So you held it, alone, carrying revelation like a live wire, burning with truth you couldn't release. The covenant of silence kept you intact until the moment when your words would land with the force of prophecy rather than the confusion of madness. The soul forge effect. Loneliness applied pressure, where comfort would have weakened resolve. Constant companionship softens the edges that were meant to cut through illusion. You've watched it happen to others, people who started with fire, with vision, with dangerous clarity. Then they found community, found love, found belonging. And slowly, subtly, the edges rounded. The sharp questions became polite conversation. The revolutionary became the reformist. The mystic became the motivational speaker. This could not happen to you. So you were placed in the forge, alone. Each unanswered prayer added heat. Each betrayal added pressure. Each night of crushing solitude hammered out weakness, burned away the need for external validation, stripped you of the addiction to approval that cripples most people before they ever begin. You learned to stand without reinforcement, an ability so rare it's almost extinct in the modern world. Most people will do anything to avoid standing alone. They will compromise values, betray intuition, abandon their path entirely rather than face the terror of solitude. But you had no choice. You were forced to stand. And in that standing, something hardened. Not your heart. That remained open, strangely, impossibly tender, despite everything. But your spine, your core, the structural integrity of your being became unbreakable. What emerged from the soul forge wasn't fragility dressed as strength. It was actual strength. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that doesn't need to. The kind that simply endures when everything else collapses. You were forged for conditions that would shatter those who developed in comfort. The loneliness wasn't trying to break you. It was trying to make you unbreakable. And it succeeded. The false alliance purge. Look back at everyone who left. Every friend who ghosted. Every lover who vanished. Every mentor who withdrew, every community that expelled you. These departures felt personal, felt like rejection, felt like evidence of your unworthiness. But the truth is more precise. They entered your life under mistaken clearance. They were never authorized for the depth they claimed to want. Their departure wasn't rejection. It was disqualification. Proximity to your calling exposed motives they didn't even know they had. In your presence, their hidden agendas surfaced: the need to control, the need to possess, the need to diminish, the need to extract. They came seeking connection, but carrying unconscious contracts to manage you, reshape you, own you, stop you. And when the mission intensified, when your frequency began to rise, when the real work started to show itself, they couldn't handle it. The relationship became uncomfortable. Your growth triggered their fear. Your clarity reflected their compromise. Your refusal to shrink activated their need to dominate. So they left. Or they attacked and then left. Or they stayed just long enough to wound you before leaving. Each departure felt devastating, but it was actually purification. The false alliances had to be purged before the real ones could form. Unauthorized connections had to self-terminate before authorized support could arrive. What you experienced as loss was actually clearance. The space wasn't empty. It was cleared. Cleared of interference, cleared of contamination, cleared of relationships that would have sabotaged the mission before it fully launched. What remained wasn't loneliness. It was clean space, sacred space, space held for those who carry the actual clearance to walk with you into what's coming. The time delay safeguard. Your life has moved slower than others, agonizingly slower. Opportunities that came easy for your peers seemed to evade you. Success that found them early passed you by. Relationships, career, recognition, achievement, all delayed, postponed, pushed back. While others advanced publicly, posting victories, celebrating milestones, ascending visible ladders, you remained behind, waiting, preparing, working in obscurity. This wasn't neglect, this was protection. Speed without readiness would have shattered your future role. The power you're being prepared to carry would have destroyed you if it arrived before you survived yourself. The delay prevented premature access. It bought you time to develop the internal infrastructure needed to handle what's coming. Because what's coming is massive. Responsibility that would have crushed you 5 years ago. Authority that would have corrupted you 3 years ago. Visibility that would have consumed you last year. The pause you've endured wasn't punishment. It was development time. Hidden, frustrating, seemingly endless development time. While others raced ahead, you were being built. From the inside out, layer by layer, depth by depth. The stage is being prepared. And you cannot arrive on that stage until the stage is ready and you are ready. Premature arrival would have meant premature destruction. The time delay safeguard kept you behind the curtain while the mechanisms of your emergence were assembled. Your frustration with the wait is understandable, but the wait is nearly over, and when you finally move, you will move with the force of all that stored preparation. Delayed, but not denied. Postponed, but not forgotten. The timing was never wrong. It was precisely, mercilessly right. The identity vacuum. You never fit anywhere. Not fully, not comfortably. Every group had a shape, and you were the wrong shape. Every tribe had a language, and yours was different. Every identity available for adoption felt like a costume that didn't fit. This wasn't confusion. This was protection against identity theft. Belonging would have assigned you a borrowed name. You would have become Christian, Democrat, artist, healer, warrior. Labels that carry inherited meaning, predefined limitations. expectations that shape behavior before you even speak. But you couldn't accept any of them completely. Something in you resisted every category, refused every box, rejected every attempt to name you according to existing frameworks. The rejection you experienced forced self-definition under pressure. With no tribe to belong to, no ready-made identity to inhabit, you had to discover who you are through direct encounter with yourself, in the vacuum, in the undefined space, in the terrifying freedom of not belonging to any established story. This was brutal, because humans are tribal creatures. We need belonging. We need recognition. We need to see ourselves reflected in community. But you were denied that comfort. The vacuum ensured you arrived whole, not adopted. You could not be shaped by tribes because you were meant to confront them, not with hostility, but with truth, with the clarity that only comes from standing outside every system long enough to see how systems operate. The identity vacuum wasn't cruelty. It was the only way to preserve the original you. The you before conditioning, the you before social agreements, the you that carries assignment rather than ambition. You were kept unclaimed so you could arrive to the mission without borrowed clothing. The Watcher's Path distance granted you perspective inaccessible to those embedded in noise, while others were inside the system. Participating, competing, performing, you were outside, watching. You observed patterns they couldn't see because they were too close, too invested, too identified with outcomes. You saw the architecture of manipulation because you weren't emotionally enlisted in the game. How influence works, how control operates, how systems harvest energy from those who believe they're free. You learned this not from books, but from observation, from the Watcher's Post, from the margin where you stood alone, witnessing everything with the clarity that only distance provides. This wasn't bitterness. It wasn't cynicism. It was education. You learned how people operate when they think no one important is watching. You learned what they hide, what they perform, what they truly value when the mask slips. You learned to distinguish between words and energy, between claimed values and revealed priorities. You developed a second sight, the ability to see beneath surface presentation into the hidden machinery of motive and fear. Most people never develop this. They live their entire lives inside the story, believing the narrative, trusting the performance. But you learn to read the room, to feel the current beneath the words, to sense when something is off, even when everything appears fine. The Watcher's Path made you a witness before making you a participant. And when you finally do participate, you will move with intelligence others lack. You will see traps before you step in them. You will recognize manipulation before it takes root. You will navigate with the precision of someone who has studied the terrain from above before walking through it. The sacred scarcity clause. Love came rarely and briefly. When it arrived, it was profound, intense, transformative, then gone. This wasn't cruelty, it was rationing. Emotional bonds were restricted to preserve focus. Deep connections arrived only to unlock specific layers within you, then withdrew before dependency could form. Each love taught something essential, opened something sealed, activated something dormant. Then it ended, not because it was false, but because its function was complete. Attachment beyond threshold would have delayed activation. You would have stayed, built a life, settled into comfort, and the mission would have remained dormant. So the bonds were dissolved, sometimes gently, often brutally, always completely. Loss trained non-attachment without destroying compassion. You learned how to love fully without being owned by it, how to open completely without losing yourself in another, how to connect deeply without making another person your source. This is mastery-level skill that most people never develop. They either close down entirely to avoid pain, or they attach desperately and call it love. But you learned the middle path, the path of open-hearted detachment, loving without grasping, connecting without fusion, giving without depleting. The sacred scarcity clause, limited love not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because where you're going, you cannot afford the kind of attachment that makes you vulnerable to emotional blackmail, that compromises your clarity, that forces you to choose between love and truth. You will love again, deeply, but you will love from wholeness, not from need. And that makes all the difference. This moment, right now, your current isolation. This is not more of the same. This is different. The isolation has completed its purpose. Alignment is imminent. What you're experiencing now is the quiet before reassignment. The systems that once expelled you are destabilizing. The structures that had no room for you are collapsing under their own contradictions. The world that pushed you to the margins is beginning to recognize that the margins were where the real action was happening all along. You are not waiting for belonging anymore. You've transcended the need. You are waiting for deployment, for activation, for the mission to go live. Everything that happened before, the isolation, the training, the purging, the delay, was preparation. This final stretch of solitude is assembly. All the pieces developed in separation are being integrated. All the skills sharpened in darkness are being calibrated for light. All the truth held in silence is organizing itself into expression. You feel it, don't you? The gathering, the convergence, the sense that something is about to shift. Not someday, soon. What could not walk with you before will soon recognize you from below, not as superior, but as someone who went ahead and returned with maps. The deployment is coming, and when it arrives, you will understand why every painful separation was necessary, why every door had to close, why every person had to leave, why you had to walk alone. You were not abandoned. You were positioned. The isolation is ending. Chosen one, but not because you're finally learning to fit in. It's ending because you've become what you were always meant to become. Unbreakable, uncorrupted, unreadable to the enemy, and unmoved by the need for approval. You've survived the protocol, the separation, the forge, the silence, and now you stand on the edge of something the ordinary world cannot see but will soon feel. You are never walking toward belonging. You are walking toward deployment. The war is real. Your role is real. And every step you took alone was a step into position. The loneliness was never the destination. It was the path. And the path has led you exactly where you needed to be. Now watch what happens next. The chosen ones are about to be revealed, not by announcement, but by emergence. Stay ready. Stay alert. The silence is about to break, and when it does, you'll know exactly why you had to walk this path alone. The hidden reason is about to become the revealed purpose, and nothing will ever be the same.